Hi, Neha. Thank you for joining me on this session of Wild Women Interviews. To introduce Neha, Neha Sinha is a wildlife conservationist and writer. Her evocative writings about nature and conservation appear in many publications. This year, HarperCollins published her debut book, Wild and Wilful. I've said it before, Neha, but congratulations. It's a wonderful book. Would you share
Thank you. Yeah.
the cover of the book? Yay. So, Neha, who are your favorite writers?
My favorite writers, first of all, thank you for having me and thank you for reading Wild and Wilful. My favorite writers are not in the nature genre. I read a lot of other kinds of fiction. I read science fiction and speculative fiction because I enjoy the writing. So my favorite writers are Ursula Le Guin, who used to write science fiction and writing with a sort of little bit of fantasy in her work. But there is one nature writer I do want to name, that's Robert Macfarlane. I really love his work. The thing that's common in all these writers that I mentioned is that they take reality, but they make it their own. Their works are very immersive and they manage to find all the facts and all the, the information, but they narrate it in a way that's very different. That's very personal to them. So in a book, I enjoy getting immersed in the voice, in a very specific voice of the person who's writing it. And that's what I really enjoy. And I read a lot of other kinds of writing that perhaps influences mine. So, I mean, yeah, I do recommend Robert Macfarlane since he's still around and still writing. It's always special the writer is still around, because a lot of writers we like are not there anymore. So I really like Rob's work.
So, who are your inspirations? Not necessarily for writing, for life, for conservation, anything.
I don't have a good answer to this because I don't actually look at people. I'm not somebody who thinks people should be heroes or people should be, I think systems work more than people do, but I do definitely like particular things I find in people, and I'm inspired by people I meet on my travels more than anything, because I find people who are living life next to animals, they have a very different kind of life. They have a very different kind of interaction or even conflict with nature, which is very, if I was in their place, I would be not so easygoing as they were probably. So, I mean, in terms of inspiration, I am inspired by everyday strength that I find in a lot of people that I meet in villages, in people, places where, places that don't sort of have names or people don't recollect them. And even in the book, I write about this man who lost his forearm to a crocodile. And, he doesn't consider himself a hero. And that is inspiring to me. His life is a conservation story, but it's not a conservation story that has an Instagram page, if you know what I'm saying. Having said that, there are many colleagues in my field who are inspiring women because they are standing up in a world where women are asked to shut up. And since this is Wild Women interview, I think it's better for me to only name the women and leave out the men. Normally, women get left out of conversation. So I am inspired by, the work of Prerna Singh Dindra, for example, because I personally know her and I know she's had many hardships and she continues to kind of raise her voice for wildlife. And I think it's, we think wildlife is glamorous, but Janki, you know how difficult it is to get published writing wildlife pieces. An outsider might think it's very easy because it has to do with big animals, it has to do with charismatic, good-looking, creatures. But it is still very difficult to have a consistent voice for wildlife, because the space for publishing, whether it's in books or whether it's in newspapers, is devoted to other subjects. It is still difficult to push through what they call a wildlife interest story. So anybody who's been engaging with the field for a long time in any meaningful way, in wildlife, would have my appreciation. And I don't like the idea that we must compete with each other, because it's also a very competitive field, wildlife conservation. But I don't like that idea. I think we really need to work with each other. We have enough problems and enemies as it is. There are enough problems that conservation faces as it is. So I definitely take inspiration from a lot of women who they get mansplained every day. They get belittled for their intellect, for their cause. We're told, don't go into the field, you'll become dark. Our data is not taken seriously sometimes. There's a lot of microaggression that happens. So I'm inspired by most women who still stick it out, every day for years on end. It's not easy.
So how did you become interested in wildlife? I read that you had been a journalist in your first career and then you came into wildlife.
I was always interested in wildlife. It's not a scientific answer, Janki. I just love animals. And I just find them very interesting. I just think I feel like, they're not recognized for the interesting things they have. Like, I think we just look at them as either beautiful or ugly. But that's something I find in your book, and I've written that in every review that I have done of your work, that you look at animals as if not people, not like they're people, but you look at animals like they're a mix of interesting characteristics. And I really like that gaze that you have. I really like that gaze in Every Creature Has a Story. And I also like that gaze in My Husband and Other Animals Part 2, because you're looking at the animal as a suite of interesting things, a suite of characteristics. And I also find animals interesting because I think they are kind of running their own society and economy, which is not human, but it's still, they have a social structure. They have an energy budget, there's that much energy they have and that much they have to achieve in a day. And I've always loved animals, and journalism happened to me because I wanted to understand the way the world works. But from the first day, I wanted to cover environment, and it doesn't happen like that in a newsroom. Like, you have to first do what they ask you. So I had to cover many other things until I could finally get down to actually writing on environment. But then all my stories were so sad. Like, all my stories were completely negative, because there are very few good stories that come out of environment. And one day I just felt that I wanted to be on the other side. I wanted to see if I could make any contribution on the other side, actually working in environment. And for that, I knew that I should be studying. So that's why I studied a degree. And then I came back and I started working in conservation. And, it's not a target-oriented field. It's not a field in which you can achieve 5 of your targets. It's a process. It's a very long process that takes decades, I suppose. So I love animals, and that's my short answer. That's why I'm in conservation. I want to make them visible. I want to make animals visible. That's my goal.
So a few years ago, Shashank Kela wrote an article in the Caravan saying that there is an abysmal lack of nature writing in India, and he was pointing to other countries and their traditions of nature writing. So do you think that's true, or have we changed? Are more and more writers coming into the fold?
Absolutely. It is changing. And I would agree with that article broadly. Till a few years ago, the nature writing was the shikar literature, in which you have people writing about men going inside the forest and trying to hunt animals, or, talking about their field experiences. But, it's devoid of any social context. It was devoid of anything other than that person, that hunt, or that person's view of in immediate nature. I think now we have many more interesting writers who are writing also about the social aspect, also about the fact that the forest is part of a larger landscape. And I must name a few over here because I think they're good and everybody listening should engage with their writing. So there's Yuvan, who's based in Chennai. He's very good. He has a book called A Naturalist's Diary, if I'm not wrong, but he also writes long posts on Instagram, which are worth reading. There's a book that I'm reading right now. It's called Tales of Hazaribagh by Mihir Vatsa. And I also recommend it. It's not nature writing per se, but it's very immersive. It's ethnographic writing on Hazaribagh. And obviously, because Hazaribagh is, a place with a lot of waterfalls and rocks, it is nature writing of one sort. And, there also are a lot of people who are journalists who are writing, whose writing could be considered nature writing. And there are publications that are giving them a platform. So there's Wire Science, which has given many people a platform. I also like Harini Nagendra's work, who, is trying to understand city planning along with nature. And so then, therefore, nature writing is not just going to Corbett National Park. It is also about what is in your balcony, what is in your city, what is in your immediate environment. And that's something Harini Nagendra and Seema Mundoli have done in Cities and Canopies. I like that book. And I do think that people are coming forward. And I think it's wonderful. It's very overdue, isn't it, Janki? We should have had much more nature writing in our country. We should have had much more recognition for it also. But it's happening. I'm happy to see that it's happening.
So coming to your book, what was the trigger for writing the book?
Exactly what I said. I wanted to make wildlife visible. I want to say that wild animals also have agency. And I feel like the history of the world can't just be the history of people, And I don't think that animals need to be like us to be ordered to be taken seriously. I don't think that we need to like animals just because they remind us of motherhood or beauty or those things that we consider good in human society. I think they live with us, we share the world with them. And I very strongly feel that we don't own the world, but we always behave like we own the world, like as if we are in total control and everything is our subject. And that's not true, is it? And I just wanted to, the entire book is about the agency of the wild animal. And of course, that also is to do with people, because stories of animals are in many ways stories of people as well, because we don't, exist in a vacuum from each other. And I just, the book has, I suppose, been cooking in me for some time, because I'm obsessed with this topic of, how we represent wildlife. And in many ways, it's a futile effort because we don't know what they're thinking. I don't know, if real elephants and tigers are totally different from what I've written, but I'm trying to sketch a portrait of the animal. So that includes the politics, and that includes the pop culture, and that includes the ecological needs of the animal. And at the end of the day, I want to say that these animals should count. It's not you're writing the history of the world. It can't just be people. It can't just be men. It has to be women, and it has to be animals, and planning a city. It can't just be, the houses. It has to be the migratory birds that come to the city, the greens and the blues, all of that, And I wrote it, I was supposed to write it by 2019, but I couldn't finish. And then the pandemic had started, and I wrote a lot of it last year, actually. And a lot of the editing was last year also. And, obviously the pandemic was difficult for all of us. I felt so claustrophobic and anxious, and I just felt so trapped. And I just also felt that nothing could be more important than our right to go out in nature. Mm-hmm. It's a personal freedom, isn't it?
So how did you keep going?
And well, first of all, I had a deadline. So I was late. It's interesting how we never keep our deadlines, and we keep, screaming artistic license for that. No, I I don't know, it was a personal project. So I felt the need to keep going, and it was very difficult. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't think I've ever done anything that's harder than writing this book. And it was very emotional, and there were a lot of tears and all of that. And I think also it's my first book, so I didn't know how much time editing would take, but editing takes a lot of time also. So I also have another job. I work for BNHS, and so I had to do that in the day. I did this at night. I wrote it in the night, and I edited also in the night. And it was just a year of a lot of hard work and obsession and tears. And I guess that's just how books are. I don't know. What do you think? Do you cry when you write your books?
Well, not physically, but yeah, it takes it out of you. I can tell you that.
No, the elephant chapter, I cried tears.
Yeah, it was a gut-wrenching chapter. So I like the way you section the book: earth, sky, water, heart. So how did you come up with that classification?
So, in my field, in conservation, we're supposed to be quite serious people, and we're supposed to be very scientific and have Latin names and a lot of referencing. But, I'm not like that. And I have to be honest, I love animals, and animals have also come to me through pop culture. So I'm not going to pretend to be all serious, okay? So because I think Captain Planet is the cartoon superhero. And there are these 5 kids with, rings. So earth, fire, wind, water, heart. So fire is not a element in which animals live, so I left fire out. But these 5 kids, when they come together, they create Captain Planet, who solves the environmental problems of the world. So of course, we don't have a Captain Planet in real life, but it's just I used to watch Captain Planet, and I thought it was cool that there was an environmental superhero, and that's it. I just sectioned my book because I think this is also the habitats that I covered. And the final section on heart is about, the pandemic and what nature means to us, and, whether we can save animals as an emotional response. Because yes, conservation should be scientific, but, if society doesn't agree to it, it will never happen, right? So there is an element of heart over there. So you need to have an element of consent and consensus as well to, get any of those things agreed and approved. So I'm not going to write a serious book because, first of all, I don't think conservation is just about science or just about being very technical. I think it is nested in society. So it is a serious book, but at the same time, I think I do want to engage with popular culture. I don't think we can get very far without it.
Yeah. So at least I think the first few chapters on the leopard, monkeys, elephants, people really behave badly with these animals. But that is one aspect of the way humans interact with them. They also worship them, and they do, in many places they live with them without making a big fuss about it. So was there a reason why you chose these really horrific incidents to build a story of how we need to, how these animals suffer?
Yeah. I mean, I think for the leopard, it is really something close to my heart in terms of what we're doing to this animal. We have the WII, the Wildlife Institute of India, in the book trying to catch a leopard that's on the campus. And it's like we want wilderness, but we don't want the wildlife that comes with it. It's like we decide which kinds of animals should be near us. And, at the same time, we are deciding the fate of people who live in villages or rural areas and saying that they should live with animals. So with the leopard, that chapter is just pure rage at what we are doing. My first primary interest is how policy deals with the animal, because I think policy making, the policies we have for catching animals, especially the leopard, for shooting animals like the leopard. The policy sets the kind of tone that society will take also. Usually a lot of conservationists focus on the hunter and basically the poor guy who lives next to the animal. And I think that is extremely unfair, because it's not fair from a social justice viewpoint, and it's not fair from a viewpoint of it's very easy and neat to start a story of an animal with the hunter, but it's not historically correct. It's not socially correct either. So with the leopard chapter, I wanted to focus on what the Delhi government was doing, which is reacting by saying we should catch the leopard and throw it somewhere else, make it someone else's problem. That is what the WII was trying to do as well. And starting from there, I go to the story of, villages where people are also killing leopards. But then I'm also trying to place it in perspective that, which is worse? A state government taking that decision, or a research institute devoted to wildlife taking that decision of moving the leopard, or, people in villages who will kill, anything that comes inside their house because they just feel threatened by it, So I think we really are doing wrong for the leopard. And every week, leopards are killed in India, or there's an attempt to kill them. In the Himalayas, it's very the conflict is very bad, and the way they translocate them is completely unscientific. And when I talk to people who are involved in bringing the leopards down, they have no identification. They're just basically shooting leopards, just whatever they see in the Himalayas, particularly. And when it comes to the rhesus macaque, again, it's an animal that slapped my mother, and it's an animal that people look at as something that will take your spectacles, that will slap you, that will tease women, because it is true that they do kind of target women a bit more, maybe because we are smaller than men, usually, generally speaking. And I feel the rhesus macaque is a mirror of her own behavior, because it's a very different kind of animal. It opens the fridge, It turns that door handle, it comes in. And it is also something that's fed at temples. It's fed at temples and it's stoned right outside them. So I wanted to use that chapter to demonstrate how bipolar we can be towards an animal. It's true also for the cobra, of course, that, we worship it, but we also kill it. And more than, about the animal, it's a mirror to how we are. And, if we don't have any coherence in our relationship with an animal, and if our relationship is going to be so bipolar, like so much hate and so much adoration, there's something wrong over there. We need to have a little bit more balance. And what we're doing with rhesus macaque in a Sola wildlife sanctuary, basically picking up all the monkeys of Delhi, not even sterilizing them, and just putting them in this sanctuary, and they've forgotten how to search for food. They are being fed every day. Okay. And the court means well, but I'm trying to say that we cannot let these arbitrary decisions be taken. You have to have ecologists, and you have to have people who study these animals taking these decisions. Should leopards all be caught and translocated without the help of ecologists? Should monkeys be caught and fed artificially to solve the monkey problem without sterilizing them? We have so many monkeys in a Sola Bhati now, and I've seen a monkey with 2 babies at the same time. They're really fecund and they have this food security. But this one time that there was a fight, a dispute, they were not fed. They starved. A lot of them starved to death because they've forgotten how to look for food. And there isn't that much food also in the sanctuary. So I'm just saying, the culling issue is also of great interest to me, in which we decide one day that we should just shoot this animal. So the rhesus macaque, and again, in Shimla being shot. And again, there are these, Goa wants to make the gaur a vermin as well. Now, these are complex issues. I'm not going to say that I should be the one setting the tone for what it should be, but we need to have a proper dialogue. We need to have a baseline assessment of populations, right? Before we make these decisions.
Yeah.
All these decisions are political, and they are as per the convenience of whoever's deciding. I wanted to illustrate that that should not be the case. We need less politics in environmental decision making.
Yeah, so after that, to read the chapter on Amur falcons, for instance, totally took me by surprise because it was just so different. You start out, it was a community hunting these birds coming in huge flocks transiting through the Northeast. And almost all the articles I've read about that phenomenon has been so one-sided. And I always wanted to hear, a perspective from the other side. And I really, really loved that chapter because you brought that perspective that I hadn't read before. And I was aware of Dolly Kikon's work, but it was really nice to see you quote her at length. And that was also another departure from the way the rest of the book was styled. Like you relied more on conservationist or a local person's perspective, or in a way it could also be the entire range. You had a local person, you had conservationists, and you also had an academic in one chapter. Did you want to comment on that?
It wasn't a design, or it wasn't it wasn't an overall structure for the book, but I think Dolly's work is important because it sets a framework or a perspective on how we look at people who are different from us. So it's true that I don't eat dogs, and it's true that many of us don't eat dogs, but we do eat meat, and the question is of morality over here, right? We all have moral codes, whether we recognize it or not. We all have moral codes. And when the Nagas were hunting the Amur falcons, and it is true that Nagas are customary hunters and they do hunt a lot. But the Amur falcon case was a little different because it got a kind of publicity as a one single event, as opposed to, the continuous hunting stories we get from markets of Nagaland and other states of the Northeast. But that I was personally involved in that project. I still have a field station there. And when I started going to that village and started talking about the hunting to other people, like the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau or, other conservation actors, they fell into this very convenient narrative that I was talking about earlier. But it's very easy, as I said, to hate a person who's not from your class, a person who's not from your community, and a person, I would say, also who's not of your caste. I would go so far as to say that, we love our stratifications in India, and there is undoubtedly a lot of classism in conservation. And this is something that troubles me because how can this be sustainable, first of all? And second of all, I don't think we need to lord over other people like this. I think, like I said, I don't believe in individual heroes. I believe that we need to come together and form a system that can work. When we're trying to work on a social issue, conservation is a social issue. So suddenly the hatred of Nagas eating dogs mingling with the fact that they are like this only. They are savages that eat everything. They eat dogs, they eat falcons. Now, a lot of communities hunt birds, and it is true that a lot of communities will not eat a bird of prey. They will eat, other kinds of birds, right? So normally people don't eat carnivores. Normally they eat either an omnivore or a herbivore. And so all these narratives came out very fast that, these people are savages, these people are barbaric, and this is just how they are. So what are you even trying to do? Now, my point is that I don't think we should be judging that in Delhi or in any other place. And I wanted to, the decision has to be theirs at the end of the day, right? So my project was all about talking to them. And I'm not a sociologist. I'm not an ethnographer either, but I just placed some information in front of them, and the decision had to be theirs because hunting is illegal. And, if you hunt 100,000 falcons, or it's almost the entire global population that comes there, not entirely, but a very large chunk. So if that happens every year, year after year, there's going to be a serious decline. And they didn't know it's a migratory bird, that it comes from another country. But ultimately, I have to say again, the decision has to be made by the community, what they want to do. And it does not help us sitting in judgment of how other people live. And Dolly's work points out the othering of the Nagas, which is very different in the way that we other communities, because the Nagas live in their own way, which they're very proud of, which is very different from the rest of tribal kind of identities in India, because the Nagas are very proud and unapologetic. It's a very fierce kind of pride, and it's very evident in the way they dress and the way that they talk. And they do say you're from India when you go there, right? They don't consider themselves to be Indian. So, this cannot be divorced from the, the aspect of conservation. And I think it's important that if we may not like somebody eating dogs, but then somebody doesn't like us eating chicken and mutton also, right? There will always be these differences, but the way that we negotiate these differences is important. And I don't want to join that chorus of, hunting is bad in an absolute term, because it is complicated. And you cannot, I think, if the chief of Vedanta is hunting, I would have a very different view. If it's trophy hunting done by somebody of a very different, economic background, I would have a different view. But I differ with other conservationists on this. I cannot, to further marginalize people who are marginalized is not something that should be done as a practice.
Okay, so we have 5 more minutes, and I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 questions. Conservationists have said for the longest time that wildlife conservation has no political patronage, and that's part of the reason why we have all these this major erosion of natural habitats that we have in this country, whether it be dams or roads or whatever it is, or solar farms. So what do you think would change that?
I think it's just money at the end of the day. It's cheaper to divert a forest than to divert any other kind of land, first of all. And second of all, these projects bring a lot of money for those who are interested, like the dams and the mines. And I think it just comes down to that. And I think all conservation becomes incidental to these bigger numerics. So as an example, these huge solar farms are coming up now in India. When I say huge, they're the size of cities. There's a renewable energy park in Kutch that's planned at 700 square kilometers. And, Kutch is such a unique ecosystem. And wildlife conservation has had patronage in terms of individuals getting access. But that's not the same as, wildlife being considered important enough to let the forest remain standing, or let the ecosystem remain the way it is. Because till today, forest officers will say forest land is cheaper to divert or destroy for projects. And if you look at the environment impact assessment and the changes the government wants to bring, it's all about environment is the price we must pay for development. So broadly, yes, I do agree that, we haven't scratched the surface even of trying to plan our country in a way that allows for conservation and allows for wildlife. And it's a difficult call because we are constantly trying to talk about the cost benefit analysis, that, you need that carbon in the ground, or it makes sense to let the ecosystem remain as it is. It makes sense to rewild or to restore. But we're very far back. We're very regressed in this conversation. And some of the recent changes in the, proposed changes in the laws seem to suggest that, it's going to get much worse in terms of looking at environment as a roadblock. So yes, I think environment does not have political patronage. It's not just wildlife. Wildlife's a subset of that. And we still have the narrative that environment is a roadblock to GDP.
So there's a question from Nishant Venugopal. He's asking if among birds, insects, mammals, has any species inspired you in this journey, or any experience that you would like to share about that species?
I like all of them. I like the creepy crawlies a lot because I find them to be a little scary, and it's a little bit of thrill. So I think a lot of my experiences of being alone in the forest, alone in the forest, staying somewhere, the building, I'm by myself. And sometimes it happens that when you go, you have so many, it's so dangerous in many ways. Now, if you're by yourself, you feel all kinds of, you feel danger from men, you feel danger from just the situation. But, I recall this, there was a frog in my suitcase this one time, and I was by myself in a tiger reserve, and it was moving. So it was very dark and there was no power, and I was just like, there's something there and I don't know what it is. So it was just the setting. It was raining outside and there was no light, literally, and there was something there and it was moving, and I was just like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what kind of creature it is. And at the end of the day, though, they're less scary than people. So it's okay, No matter what an animal does, like even if I get eaten by a tiger, I'll still say that, they're less, they're not so complicated. They're not so, they don't plot things the way people do. And when I'm by myself in the forest, I definitely still, fear or I'm apprehensive about people than I am about animals. So I think I like all of them. And I have a lot of memories from Delhi when I was growing up of a lot of insects that came after the rain, and they're just gone now. Like you just don't have those numbers of insects anymore. And I feel that change in our memories as well, because we don't remember it. We don't remember the stuff like that. And I miss them, I miss my life being enmeshed with creatures. It's definitely, I see a crash in many, many animals. And I think the world is just really boring without animals. That's just the bottom line. I think if it's just people, it's really boring, because at the end of the day, how much can we say to each other? We need to record our lives and our histories in books and music. But somewhere, we also need to have that encounter with a tail or a head, feathers, whatever, because they're also living their lives in parallel to us. And I just find that interesting. So they all inspire me. I don't like centipedes because when I was a kid, my mother would say that they would climb inside my ear and eat my brains. And I'm scared of them, but that's the only one. Yeah, I know, right?
That's not
See,
true, right?
All this myth making should end now.
Yeah. Okay.
I know. That's what I'm saying. It's myth making, and it should stop.
Sorry, we are running out of time. I'm going to end with this commercial. Please buy Neha's charming book, Wild and Wilful. It's available as hard copy on Kindle. And after you read the book, please leave ratings on Amazon, Goodreads, wherever you do that, because it helps other people find the book. Thank you so much, Neha. That was fun talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks everyone for joining us too. I'm sorry, I don't know how to figure out the technology. Maybe next time. Bye.
Bye.